Tonight on Ground Crew Command Radio. That's right, folks. Technical attacks, technical issues are not getting in our way. That's the reason for the 3-minute delay with the commencement of this radio show. And it's a huge show, not just because we have the one, the only David Icke on, but also because it's the big announcement for next week's blue moon, super moon, lunar eclipse, all combined into one. Mass meditation is getting announced tonight. The big call out is starting from tonight from this show, and we're going to get in touch with it, really tune into the energies, and it's time to rally the troops is a better way to put it, to organize this mass meditation for next Wednesday. It'll be 6 a.m. Mountain Time that the mass meditation will occur on this very radio show live. So make sure you raise your hand and step forward to make that happen. More on this later. Of course, we'll give you updates on the 144,000 activation campaign and the Pierce the Veil Global Leylons taking on Chamber project later on in the show. And of course, as always, we have the news. We got, the government shutdown fiasco has been delayed, and it'll probably continue to get delayed until the time is right. And will the Zimbabwe dollar rise with the new high frequencies that we're going to make sure about with next week's mass meditation, and with the Earth Alliance planning to install it as the new African currency in a move to liberate the long impoverished African continent from Rothschild, Vatican, and P2 tyranny. And despite White Dragon Society concerns that the world situation is far too volatile from any US government reset with the installation of the or reinstallation of the Constitutional Republic, we're reminding here at Ground Crew Command Headquarters the rest of the world that the Constitutional Republic of the United States has no debt. Okay, it's only the cabal's United States of America corporate debt. So the debtors are going to have to chase their money with the cabal when that goes down. And of course, Pentagon sources say secret space program may have been used to nuke the missiles aimed at Hawaii and Japan and stop the cabal from leaving the Earth as well. White Hat hits cabal stronghold of Reno, Nevada, the last major unregulated offshore banking center on Earth where the Rothschild family have been gathering, with constant small earthquakes. And of course, they're hitting their underground base that's tied to the usual anti-gravity disk technology and Nazi activity in Antarctica. And all this has precipitated a meeting request from a senior CIA official said to be related to Admiral Byrd of the famous Antarctica White Hat attack on Nazi presence there in 1947. We all know about that one, folks. To discuss White Hat plans with the White Dragon Society planetary liberation plans right on the super blue moon eclipse, when you and I, the Army of Light, will be meditating, will be making our mark. So tune in to find how the 144,000 can make sure that this critical meeting is a success for all of us. And this and so much more, folks, tonight on Ground Crew Command Radio. This is the Unknown Light Warrior. And we're back. You're listening to Ground Crew Command Radio. This is the Unknown Light Warrior. A lot happening, folks. A lot happening. And no matter what we're going through with our day-to-day, the so-called mundane, we have to stand fast and make that big step forward at the right moment when our higher selves, our soul path, our calling reaches out to us, beckons us, when Goddess asks us to please help this one more time. And that date is coming next Wednesday. It's next Wednesday, 8 a.m. Only the second 144,000 global mass meditation that's going to shift and push and lift Gaia, humanity, and all the children of the world up to a much higher frequency, to make that turn, that fork in the road turn to the higher timeline. That'll change things again, make things go faster, make things go quicker, to the mass arrest, and to the long-awaited, the grand solar flash, that transition into 5D. We need to make the mass arrest happen soon, folks, because humanity desperately needs the real healing, the mass landings, the love that will be unleashed straight after the mass arrest, so that humanity can raise its consciousness, to heal and raise its consciousness much faster, much sooner. And like Cobra said, the goddess entity of the central sun will sense that raise in humanity's consciousness on this planet, and will send out the solar flash to transition us into the 5D long last. And it really does remind me of that phenomenal speech by the great Martin Luther King Jr., free at last, thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. That's right, we're fighting for everything. And you can rely on us here at Return to Your Truth, and headquarters of the 144,000 Ground Crew Command Radio, to keep our flag always raised high, to keep that beacon of light that you can always see, no matter where you are, in the dark, chaotic loudness of the 3D matrix. You can always turn and see that beacon of light that is Ground Crew Command headquarters. And stay tuned, folks, because we've got to make this happen. So mark it on your calendar. The second 144,000 global mass meditation will be at 8 a.m. Eastern US time next Wednesday, the 31st of January, for the Super Blue Moon Lunar Eclipse Showdown, where we will take charge and shift planet in the right direction, shift the planet in an even better direction, in yet another fork in the road. And as always, I'll give updates on where things are at with the 144,000 activation campaign. We're still building it. We're still trying to make things happen to get the numbers up. And the Pierce the Veil Global Ley Lines Taking on Chamber project, we'll give you an update on that, on what's happening with that after the David Icke interview. Now, this interview with David Icke, it is a pre-record from this morning for obvious reasons, David Icke being in the UK. So it's all happening here, folks, and there's some amazing things here revealed regarding the AI as it relates to Morgellons disease, chemtrails, and lots of other stuff. Empowering clarity. As always, here on Ground Crew Command Radio, where it's all about you. The number one goal of Ground Crew Command Radio is for you, the listener, to walk away with something big every episode, so that you walk away with something with more certainty than before, with less fear than before, with a higher frequency than before each episode, so that you're much closer and much closer to your true identity that has no fear, that has no uncertainty. So, I'll play the short break, musical break, and I'll be right back with the one and only David Icke, the man who's been leading the charge in terms of the most visible public persona of the awakening movement, no doubt. Mr. David Icke is coming right back after this short break, ladies and gentlemen.
And we're back. You're listening to Ground Crew Command Radio. This is the Unknown Light Warrior. And, of course, I'm really grateful and excited to have David Icke on the show this week, because not just because it's David Icke, one of the most, I suppose, the highest profile speakers and authors, but because what I love most about David Icke is he's really led by example. He's managed to really receive, grasp, accrete, and walk the talk in terms of, how can I put it, having that noticeable absence of fear with the way you live your life, David, and through that unshakable knowing that you've acquired about our true innate power. And that's the two biggest and most critical things that I've noticed about you. And I want to get into that because this is a big deal. One of the, I suppose, the kind of guiding light, if you will, of this interview and conversation with you was that I would really love the audience to have more than just a wonderful, enjoyable listen and a fascinating sort of listening to a fascinating conversation and just passing their time. One of my goals here is for people to also walk away with that innate knowing of our true power, which you seem to display so well, and that absence of fear. I hope I've articulated that well enough, if you know what I mean. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, mate. Yeah, I think it's important that we don't just talk about things, but we do what we can to live them, challenging as that is in the kind of world that we live in, which is specifically structured to stop us living them, to keep us in fear, to keep us in ignorance, to keep us in a state of little me perception. But if we're going to break through this wall of deceit, this wall of perceptual manipulation, then we have to live our talk as best we can. And crucial to that is letting go of fear. Fear of what other people think of us, which is the great prison that most people live in, which makes most people not live their life, not live their truth, not live their sense of reality, sense of who they are, but to live someone else's version of what others believe they should be. It's this psychological fascism where people insist that everyone else lives their life and operates within the opinions and belief systems that they have. That is this situation we're in, where the few can control the many. Of course, the many control each other. You know, when you and what we're looking at now, of course, is an increasingly extreme expression of that in what we call political correctness and all that goes with it, where people's opinions now are being attacked for being just mildly different to the prevailing narrative and the prevailing norm. So from my perspective, and I've done this big time in a new book I've just got out called Everything You Need to Know But It's Never Been Told. I've taken this stuff head on, because if the problem is succumbing to this psychological fascism, to silence us and to keep us from living our truth and instead acting the truth of others just to have a quiet life. Well, if that's how we got into this mess, then how we get out of it, surely, is to reverse that and not to be intimidated, not to have others dictate what we should say and not say, and to say the unsayable and to do the undoable. See, we can talk forever in esoteric concepts, but in the end, that perceptual change that we call the awakening has to be expressed in terms of action, of living the words, not just speaking them.
That's right. That's right. And once again, as far as I'm concerned, you set the best example of this. You know, you've been, I like to use the term screaming bloody murder about what's really going on and our innate dormant power since the early 90s, you know. And I mean, we're going to get into all sorts of, you know, very pertinent present time discussions, but really, this is the most important part of our talk. You know, you've acquired this unshakable knowing that you got and started to grow within you. As far as I'm aware, seemingly after that, what you explained years ago, some sort of activation process that you experienced in Peru, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well, it started in 1990 when I saw a psychic after a series of coincidences. I never intended to, but I went there in the end because something strange had been going on in my life for about a year. Every time I was in a room alone, it felt I wasn't alone. And eventually I went to see this psychic to see if she could understand what was happening to me. And that kicked it all off. I mean, that's when it became conscious. I was on some kind of journey here. But the key for me, the difference between being in the prison cell of perceptual servitude to others and being free of that, both in what we say and what we do, it's simply a transformation of perception of self-identity. It is that simple. You know, if you look at the way a human life is lived, it is from cradle to grave a perceptual download, externally delivered, of a perception of self, a perception of reality, a perception of the world, a perception of what is and isn't, what's possible and not possible, what reality is and what it's not. It's from the earliest age. First of all, when you come out of the womb, immediately your parents who've been through this same process are influencing your perceptions. Then you go into the education system, what passes for it, and that is downloading now throughout your formative years the official version of everything. And on top of that, you've got the media 24/7 giving you the same basic version of everything, what I call the postage stamp consensus. All your friends and associates who've been through the same system or are still going through the same system and process and have accepted it as real, they are your peers pressuring you to conform to what they've conformed to and not to question it. Then these people at the end of the education process go off into the world to become the journalists, the scientists, the doctors, the politicians, the CEOs, etc. And they run the institutions from the same perception that they picked up, that core download of normal, the postage stamp consensus. And so they're all telling each other that this download of normal and real that they've taken on is how things are. And basically, from cradle to grave, if you don't go outside the mainstream everything, all you're hearing is confirmation of a certain perception of self and reality. And so if you fall for that, then you will think that who you are is your name, your job, your color, your religion, your life story, your income bracket. All these labels are who you are, when they are just experiences that the real you is having, and the real you is simply a state of awareness, a point of attention within infinite awareness, which in the end we are all expressions of. Now that point of attention can be the size of a pea in terms of your perception of everything, or it can be an expanded perception. Either you're looking down the wrong end down a telescope from this point of observation, this point of attention with infinite awareness, or you're looking at a vast panorama. It's just how much we're prepared to open our minds to the greater consciousness, the greater possibility, the greater infinity, and to do that, how much we are prepared to question and reject and override that incessant perceptual program that we are subjected to from cradle to grave. And what I see happening, and I've seen it happening more than ever before on this world speaking tour I've been on for 18 months, is that not only vast numbers of people are now going through this process of questioning the program. Not everyone's awakening and saying I'm all that is, has been, and ever can be. It's at different levels, but just it's a start, just to say, why should I believe a government that's constantly lied to me? Why should I believe what they're going to say next? Why don't we question what we're being told about what this event is about and why it happened in this event, etc.? That's a start. But if you go on that road and you start questioning and making things stand up and justify themselves with evidence and with intelligence, what starts to happen is the whole damn system in all its multiple forms and layers starts to crumble. The house of cards crumbles, because basically the house of cards is standing there because the people are holding it together by their belief in its credibility, by their belief in the fact that it's real. Once you start to question, that cement starts to crack, which is human perception. And you say, hold on a second, this doesn't make sense. Why do they do that? Why don't they do it this way? Why did that happen? Why didn't they do this instead? And you start to realize that there is, we live in a world, not in terms of society transforming events, not in a world of random events, but in a world of carefully planned events which are pushing us into a certain direction, a direction of more and more control, more and more oppression, more and more destruction of freedom of speech. And at the end of that, what they're planning, and we're seeing it unfolding now, is the end of the human mind through connection and being overridden by artificial intelligence. Now, if they're going to do that, then they have to do two things. They have to keep us in ignorance that that's where it's going and why, and they have to control information that we receive so that we will perceive everything the way they want us to. This is why you're seeing the internet giants, all controlled in the end by the same people, like Facebook, Google, Twitter, all of these things, increasingly censoring anything that's alternative to the official narrative. Because what's been happening, and you'll know this, people listening to this program will know this, what's been happening with the emergence of what's called the alternative media, though that's a great spectrum as well, is that people have had access to information they didn't have access to before. And for vast numbers of people who've heard it, it's made more sense than what they've been told all their lives. And there is now this desperation to put the lid on the free flow of alternative information to stop this process happening. But and this whole political correctness scenario is about intimidating people into silence so they will not speak this alternative way of seeing everything because they fear the consequences of condemnation and abuse if they do so. And that's why, if we really do believe in the fact that a difference has to be made, if we really do believe that we are just consciousness having an experience, then we shouldn't hand over our power to the experience by fearing an experience of ridicule and abuse. No one said it was going to be easy, but we need to stand up and speak our truth, no matter what the consequences. That's the only way anything's ever changed.
Exactly. It's, you know, I always say to people in articles and almost every episode, if you really knew who you were, who you are, and you were able to connect with that and integrate with that and return back far enough back to that true identity, A, you would have no fear, okay? B, the system would continue to collapse far faster, you know, because you know exactly that, as well as many people already know, that most of us, with our day-to-day, okay, with our so-called problems and so forth, we operate from all of our actions, thoughts, emotions, perceptions, what have you. We always, well, most of us certainly, operate from our false persona, our false personality, which is basically a false entity that's shaped by our conditionings, beliefs, programs, experiences, traumas throughout this current incarnation. And most of us operate from that, okay? And it's just a matter of making that shift back into who you really are, which is one of the biggest things that petrifies the cabal, you know, controllers, whatever you want to call them, both physical and non-physical, absolutely petrifies them. And again, as far as I'm concerned, you know, you've set the best example of that, which is why I want people to really be able to, I suppose, for lack of a better term, receive that knowing, that taste of that innate knowing of our power, which which has resulted in you speaking to huge audiences, displaying this complete absence of fear. And I mean, I remember back, what was it, when the whole mass arrest thing came out back in 2012 or something like that. You know, and your reaction, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm just going off memory, but your reaction was mass arrests, you know, with the kind of attitude implying we don't even need mass arrest. We can do this ourselves if we just activate our dormant abilities initially through that you know, unshakable knowing. And even other speakers and authors that you've, you know, sometimes disagreed with, such as David Wilcock or Will Cobra, even they've said if just one of us on the surface of this planet they both say the same thing in different ways. David Wilcock said if one of us activates our DNA enough, and Cobra says if one of us anchors in our I am presence down to the physical level, just one of us doing that, the so-called event can happen overnight. And what do you say to that? Because I really want people to receive the energy of this, to help them know who they are.
Well, you see, I see it in very much more simple terms, I think. And I think what we tend to do is complicate things and make them sound complex when it's actually very simple. For instance, people say you must seek enlightenment. No, we mustn't. In the act of seeking, we're always seeking and we're never finding. We need to realize that we are already enlightened because we are already a point of attention within infinite everything. And we can be a point of attention that says, I am Mrs. Smith who works on the checkout in the supermarket, and that's all I am. Or we can be a point of attention that says, I'm all that is, has been, and ever can be. And the difference in the experiences and the ability to make a difference between those two perceptions, that's all they are. That doesn't mean the person who says I am and knows that they are all that is, has been, ever can be is more special or better than Mrs. Smith who says I'm just working on the checkout. That's all I am. It's just because both are an expression of the same infinite awareness. It's about the perception and therefore the amount of that infinite awareness that we are accessing. And what this whole conspiracy is about in its foundation form is imprisoning people with a fake self-identity, what I call phantom self, the labels that we're given and we self-identify with, to deluge us with those labels. And of course, if you look at this whole transgender, different sexuality arena that's exploded, what is that doing? What is that doing? It is, again, taking us, or taking those that fall for it, even deeper into the minutiae of self-identity. Self-identity and the perception of it is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So now you have this long list of letters getting longer and longer to identify who you are. It's a nonsense. If you're having an experience, infinite awareness having an experience, and the experience is that you feel you're in the wrong body, well, that's fine. That is the way things are, and you should be respected for that and supported in that and all the rest of it, and certainly not discriminated against. But that's different from this increasingly myopic perception of self-identity. And the smaller our perception, the more detailed this phantom self-perception becomes. So the letters in the word get longer, or in the term get longer and longer. The letters. The more we are distancing ourselves and withdrawing ourselves from that level of self that is the true self in awareness of itself, which is simply consciousness. This is the nonsense of race and all these labels that people have. They are experiences. Sexuality, man, woman, they are experiences. They are not the ultimate nature of the I. And so if you say to someone, who are you? And they say, I am whatever the job is, I am whatever the sex is, I am whatever the race is, then you've got someone who is, and most people do this, of course, because of the nature of the programming, they are self-identifying, not with the self, but with the illusion of self, the phantom self. And it's only phantom self-perception that can be manipulated en masse by a few people. Because you look at one level of this, once you've got phantom self-perceptions of self-identity, you have an endless possibility for divide and rule by playing off these different labels against each other. And as we've gone deeper and deeper into this minutiae of alleged self-identity, we have situations now, a few weeks ago in Britain, where a feminist and a transgender activist were having a fight in the street. This is, we are being pulled out even more, in even more detail, out of the nature and perception of the true self. Now, this is not done by accident, done because something you mentioned a few minutes ago, this hidden hand that I have been exposing now for decades and decades is terrified of people remembering the true nature of self, because the game's up then. It can only manipulate people in phantom self mode. Because people in phantom self mode see dots, they don't see pictures. They see strands, they don't see tapestries. And when you expand your awareness out of phantom self and you reassess your self-identity, because you're accessing a wider and wider spectrum, if you like, of this awareness that we all are, you now start to see the picture. You see how the dots and the strands connect into something else. You stop seeing pixels, you start seeing pictures. And people in that mode who then try to explain how the world is operating by seeing those connections, to someone who sees only dots, those people are crazy. Because if you're only seeing dots and not pictures, how can you understand someone describing a picture to you that you cannot see? But what is happening, and more of this information has got out over the last 10, 20 years, is people are now beginning to see, not least because events are unfolding as they were predicted to unfold, that actually the world is not like they thought it was. And so we're making progress, very, very big progress around the world in the sense of people are now starting to see the pictures and not just the pixels. But the key to the whole conspiracy of human control is to hold people in a perceptual servitude of the world, but crucial, the bottom line of all of it, to hold them in a perceptual servitude of their own self-identity. Because once you start to self-identify with being awareness, having the experience, now the experience is losing its power over you. And another thing disappears as you start to reassess your self-identity. Fear is what is fear? If you think about it, It's fear of consequences. And what are consequences? They are experiences. So what we're looking at is fear of experiences. And the reason that people fear experiences is because they think the experience is who they are. It's not. It's just something that their true self is experiencing. And you know, that is the crucial transformation from I am little me, phantom self, the labels, to I am infinite awareness, having an experience with what are termed those labels. And you start to live life instead of life living you, which phantom self doesn't live life, life lives it. You start to live your life, you start to take control of your life when you start to realize the nature of who we really are.
Exactly. Brilliantly said. It all comes down to disidentifying with your false persona, false identity, and pivoting and reconnecting just through, even just like you said, shifting the point of attention to who you really are, you know, your true identity. And of course, this mass awakening that we've seen, especially in the last 15 years, as you've said in the past, you know, the cabal knew this was going to happen, and therefore they've drastically amplified the whole social engineering rollout with political correctness and identity politics, and it's, you know, obviously it's greatly amplified to try to divide and conquer as always. So, you know, that's just something we have to obviously rise above, doing that shift and returning back to our true identity, like you really well said. And now, again, folks, David Icke's really walking the talk. And before we get into the whole AI algorithm, the whole AI consciousness, which is an important topic I want us to cover, I remember in an article you wrote, I think it was around 2010, you know, you talk about these, again, I'm going off memory here. You'll talk about these electrical or non-physical spider-type entities you would see in your room at night, you know. And I remember you saying that you would just walk right up to them and they'd disappear or something, you know, like you had no fear, you know, and you showed them who's boss. And I pin that on your unshakable knowing, you know, of our truth and our power, that you've done your best to be an example of you know, of that kind of fearlessness and knowing your own sovereignty. And big deal, folks, you know, where you can get yourself to that point where that fear really does dissipate, if not completely disappear. So now, let me see. First of all, the other reason why I bring that particular point up, that old article, is just to quickly mention, is that connect? Do you think that incident back then, I mean, even if you even remember it, is that connected to the whole, what have we got here, the whole spider thing that controls the planet, you know, because you have spoken of that?
Well, I've used the spider as an analogy of who's controlling the center of the web, and that spider, not literally, but symbolically, is not human. It's, in the end, it doesn't even take form. It's a very inverted state of awareness, which, in its extreme form, is what people in our society call psychopaths. It's psychopathic. And if this deeply inverted, distorted state of awareness takes control of you, then you become psychopathic. You lose, which is what psychopaths don't have, you lose empathy. You lose the ability to empathize and put yourself in the feelings of others that you are affecting, and thus you have no emotional consequence for anything that you do. This is why I've said many times over the years, it's a big mistake to judge what you would do by what this hidden hand would do, because it's not the same. If you have empathy, you couldn't order, the innocent to be pepper bombed from the sky day after day after day. You couldn't. You couldn't have people going hungry in a world of plenty. You couldn't abuse children. Your empathetic fail-safe mechanism would never even allow you to go near that. You'd be too horrified, too emotionally affected. But if you don't have empathy, which, like I say, psychopaths don't, it's the key element of a psychopathic personality, then you will do that. And not only will you do it, you'll get off on it. And so we're not dealing with a state of awareness that is what people would normally interact with. I mean, there are a lot of psychopaths in general society, but when you have extreme psychopaths making the decisions of what happens in the world, not least militarily and financially, etc., then you are in a situation that can manifest nothing but the world that we live in, which is one of extraordinarily the wealth concentration now is extraordinary. You're looking at tens of people owning the wealth that vast tracts and percentages of the world population together don't own. So, we're going in this direction of the concentration of power and the concentration of wealth that comes with the concentration of power. And you do that by psychopathic behavior, by having no problem with screwing people financially, so you throw them on the street, with fixing mortgage documents so that you throw people off the street out of houses you don't even own and have a mortgage on, whereby you'll bomb without thought of the consequences anywhere and anyone that you think will advance what you desire, what you're trying to make happen. And we have allowed those people, that awareness, to take control of the direction of the world. And this is why I do shake my head sometimes when I see people that call themselves spiritual, who say we must let go of fear, who then will criticize people for exposing these things because they say it's too negative. Well, what happened to letting go of fear? I tell you what's negative: ignorance. Because ignorance allows the few to impose itself on the many through the ignorance of the many of what's going on and who's behind it. Ignorance is the negative thing, not knowledge of what's going on. There might be knowledge of how we'd like it to be, but there's also knowledge of what is, and we have to be mature enough, and yes, if you want to use that term, spiritually awake enough to actually face it and deal with it instead of running away and saying, shut up, don't want to hear it. And what I found over the years, when I first went to America, and this is in kind of just past 1995, yeah, maybe 96 was the first time that this happened. And I went out to America to talk, and I talked to nobody. I was talking in people's front rooms and stuff like that. And I remember at one point, I did get asked to go and speak at what were then called whole life expos. They were big, like, New Age events with multiple speakers over like 3 days or so. And I was the strange bloke from Britain who was talking about conspiracy, and they put me on late at night when everyone had gone home. And the big speakers were the people talking about, spirituality and what have you. And I remember the first one I went to was in Denver. And I walked into this vast warehouse where it was being held, and there were stalls and what have you all over it, with people selling things and doing demonstrations on various things, all very nice. But I remember standing in the middle of that hall, that day, and I said to someone who was with me, this energy is dead. This energy is going nowhere. You know why? Because it was an energy that wouldn't face reality. We can talk about spirituality in one way, but in another, for many people, it's a form of escape. It's a way of escaping from the world. I don't think we come into this reality to then try to persuade ourselves we haven't. There's something going on. We need to face it. Understanding the nature of reality and how it works is absolutely essential to changing it, because it's the manipulation of that reality by people that do know how it works that is behind the conspiracy and the ability of the few to control the many. But if you just stop at the level of looking at things on the point of I'm going no further because it gets a bit unpleasant from here on in, then we're not going to change anything, and it becomes a means of escape, not a means to change anything. And within a very short time after I did that Denver event, the whole Life Expo arena just collapsed in a matter of years, one after the other. There were two groups, and they both went eventually, because the cutting edge was moving, it was shifting, and what was coming in on one side was this, what you might call Christian patriot perception, belief system, could see on one level that the world was being controlled by forces that were not the ones that people thought were in control, that there was something behind governments. They could see that. But the foundation of that belief system was basically American patriotism and Christianity, which is fair enough. If people want to believe that, well, they can believe it. And there was this big gulf between the two. It's one of the reasons why the New Age arena was rejecting that explanation of the conspiracy, because there was such a belief system chasm. But what's happening, and this is what I've been trying to do all these last nearly 30 years, is to bring those two things together, to realize, yes, there is a conspiracy. Yes, there is an incredibly distorted, dark, if you want to use that term, force manipulating human perception, and through that manipulating human society. But at the same time, to understand that and how it works and how we overcome it is also to understand the nature of reality itself, which a lot of the Christian patriot side of it did not want to look at, because it was deemed not biblical, not supported by the Bible. Therefore, it can't be true. And yet, ironically, when you look at biblical texts, they talk about a manipulating force that's manipulating human society and human perception. They call them in the Bible demons, for instance. And you have the Islamic belief system, which has a similar concept, which they call jinn. And then you have the Gnostic belief system, which called the same force archons, or manipulators, deceivers in the unseen. So actually, if people would just breathe and let their minds wander a little, then you'll see that what appeared to be a Christian patriot conspiracy polarity and what appeared to be New Age spiritual polarity, actually, if they would just both open their minds to expand beyond their belief system, then they would see that there is an enormous amount of common ground and common perception, but using different language. And it's bringing this together. This is why my books never talk about the conspiracy without the nature of reality and the nature of who we are, because the conspiracy if you look deep in the shadows where it's really coming from, is founded on that force understanding how reality works and how human perception creates it, and on the other side, keeping that knowledge from the target population. Because if our perceptions, and I explain in the books how this works, it's just a matter of physics, basically. Because our perceptions manifest our reality, it means that if you can control someone's perception, and in terms of humanity, collectively control their perception, you're controlling their experience reality. You know, if I program this computer with certain data, I can dictate what comes on the screen or not. The computer's not dictating it; it's doing what the coding's telling it to do. And for coding, read manipulating human perception of reality. So the whole stadium on which this is played, both the enslavement and the freedom, is perception. It's perceptions that have to change. How many times do you see a revolution change the people in power, but not what happens? Only the people doing it change, because the perception that ran the revolution was basically another expression of the perception that the revolution wished to overthrow, and so they changed personnel, but they didn't change reality. They didn't change society. The only revolutions that ever change anything are revolutions of perception, because that does change everything. It has to change when perception changes. And this is where the whole thing is being played out. And we can talk about banking scams. We should. We can talk about the manipulation of 9/11 and manipulated wars, etc. But we need to know that, because that's all part of the perception deception. But in the end, it's human perception that has to change. I mean, you know, if I'm in a room now with people, and my perception is that, you know, I'm antagonistic towards those people, and I have to fight those people, and they have a different opinion from me, so I have to impose my will upon them, and I have to tell them how ridiculous and bad they are because they have a different opinion from me, then there's a certain experience that's going to happen. It's not going to be very nice. But if I say to the same people, hey, I don't agree with you, but I respect your right to have your opinion. Let's hear what you've got to say. Well, this is what I feel. You know, I don't believe what you believe, but, you know, let's have a chat. This is what I believe. What do you think? Then we're going to have a nice experience. It doesn't mean we're going to agree, but we're going to have a nice experience. And the only thing that's changed between the two is the perceptions of the situation. And so what we have now manipulated systematically and mercilessly, not least through the colleges and universities, is the perception now among what are called ironically progressive when they're regressive, is that only their opinion has validity. Thus, anyone who has a different opinion must by definition be wrong, and must by definition be a bigot, a racist, and deeply unpleasant. And this is what's happening now. The polarities are being created, and so-called progressive people, and there'll be a lot of these progressives that were, you know, in what was once called the New Age movement, who are actually the very inversion of what they claim to be. They talk about diversity when they want to destroy diversity by silencing people they don't agree with. I mean, it's a form of mental illness. And I don't say that in terms of, you know, just a throwaway line. Oh, yeah, symbolically, they're mentally ill. I say literally it's a form of mental illness. If you define mental illness as an incapacity to think outside of your own opinion, of your own dogma. And that's what we're looking at. If you can't think outside your own dogma, that's only one level of it. That's fair enough. You've got a closed mind. But when you then say, and anyone that doesn't have a closed mind like me and doesn't believe what I believe and have the opinions that I have, I must attack, I must abuse, I must shut down, silence, then I think you're moving into the realms of mental illness.
Yeah, and they do justify violence with that kind of thing, exactly. Anyone who disagrees with them. And a big part of this, as you know, is, you know, a person doesn't have, say something that's real, okay, something that's very real that, we see and know about. But if they don't have that as even as a reference point in their minds, then they can't see it, even if it's right in front of them. It's like the old story about, the native Indians in the Caribbean not being able to see Columbus's clippers, even though they were right in front of them in the middle of the bay, because they didn't know such things existed and they literally couldn't see them. And that's a really big one. Just being able to raise that consciousness, raise your level of what is real and therefore in front of you, and then you start to be able to see it, which more than explains the extremely aggressive, meticulous, multi-layered mind control, manipulation programs and social engineering programs of the cabal. And we can go on about that for hours, but unfortunately we have to move on, and let's get into the Silicon Valley crackpots, which was a great way to put it. Apparently you've said that DARPA is controlling the world through Silicon Valley, Alexa, what's the other one? Siri, I think it was called, virtual reality games, and there is a plan to connect the human mind to the AI by 2030. And can you talk a bit more about, the master plan to turn children into computer terminals, starting with, games on tablets, to smart watches on the body, to microchips eventually, that is, being implemented in Silicon Valley. Because, folks, the reason why we're going to talk about this right now is it's got nothing to do with fear. It's about, if enough people knew about the power of their consciousness, okay, because consciousness is light, okay, and when you put your consciousness on something quote unquote scary, it opens up the opportunity to transmute, to validate it so it doesn't grow toxic and overcome us all through our unconsciousness. And that's why the news portion of Ground Crew Command, with a promotional article, I title it, with what to shine the transmutational light of your consciousness on this week. So tell us about that.
Well, first of all, Ray Kurzweil, the Google executive, because Google and Facebook are among the leaders in this whole transhumanist AI agenda. A lot of people think it's a social media platform only or a search engine only. No way. And so Ray Kurzweil's got this 2030 year that he talks about when the human brain will be then connected to AI, and he says that after that, as AI gets more and more impacting upon the human mind, it will do more and more of human thinking until there's no human thinking left. Now, you would say, well, why the hell are they telling us that? Well, they're telling us it because the sales pitch is that will make us superhuman. So therefore, we all ought to be, desperate for that to happen. It's all a massive con trick, and this has been leading somewhere. This distorted awareness that takes many forms. It takes extraterrestrial form, takes human form, has been guiding humanity along a journey leading to an end, and its end is basically to manipulate humanity to imprison itself. So what's been happening, and I go into this in some detail in the books, is if you gave modern day technology to Stone Age people, it'd be a waste of time. No good giving a Stone Age person a computer. They wouldn't know what it was. Think it was something from the gods or something. They wouldn't understand what it was. So what's been happening is the human intellect has been developed and developed and developed, and the education system and science is massively part of this, to the point where it is clever enough, basically left side of the brain, to build its own technological prison, but not wise enough to connect the dots, which is right brain, heart, excuse me, to see that that's what it's doing. And the idea has been to lead us along this road to the point where the brain, the five sense perceptual level of humanity, is connected to AI through what Kurzweil calls the cloud, and AI then becomes that five sense level of perception. Instead of manipulating perception, which has happened up to this point, AI becomes the perception. And if it becomes the perception, it's not going to be a perception that we are infinite awareness having an experience. So what they've been working towards is this technological entrapment of what you might call five sense perception, so that it is completely disconnected perceptually and in awareness from the greater consciousness of which we're all an expression. This is what it's there for. And we've been taken down this road. I call it the totalitarian tiptoe, step by step by step by step. First, they get the and they are concentrating this, not totally by any means, but massively concentrating this on the young and children and young people, because they're going to be the adults when this stuff's supposed to be happening in its fully flown nightmare. Of AI control of the human mind and human emotions and human perceptions. So what you have is this concentration on children and the young. And the first thing is to get them addicted to technology, so the technology becomes the master of them. And when you then look at these things like the Icke and Alexa and all these so-called assistants that are connected to the internet, produced by Amazon and all the rest of it, all that is perceptually pulling in and merging human perception with AI. It's merging. The more and more AI is involved in human life, thus human perception. So now people in their homes all over the world are having conversations with a piece of technology as if it's human. This is the merging perceptually that's taking place. Then they moved on, where they're well into this now, to technology that people wear on the body, because the idea is to get in the body. There's your Google Glass and your Apple Watch and your Bluetooth on the ear. And now we're moving rapidly into what they call implantables, which is to put technology in the body, which then can't be removed, which will connect the human mind, the human body, the human emotional processes to AI, which will then become the human mind. And the human, as we perceive human to be, will be no more. That's the whole point of what is happening. But if you don't connect the dots, then you'll just see a series of random events. And therefore, you will get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you'll go down and you'll stand in a long line round the street and through the streets so that you can get the next piece of your enslavement from Apple or whatever when it's revealed in the dead of night. And so I got one of the first ones. Oh, kind of round of applause. You're the first person to get this next stage of your enslavement. It's madness, but you see, again, it's perception. And what is happening, this is why, we now have people that go into emotional trauma if their phone battery is getting low. We get people going into emotional trauma. These are now medical conditions. If they're somewhere where there's no Wi-Fi, because we have this digital heroin, and it's been my view for a long time that there's something coming off these phones and this technology which is adding to that addiction through frequency vibrational means. So the next thing is, because once you get into this, the world opens up and things that seem to be random take on a very different view. Kurzweil's cloud is supposed to entrap every human being on the planet, everybody, and eventually. And therefore, you need this technological sub-reality, this Wi-Fi cloud everywhere. And this is why companies like Facebook and many, many others, like SpaceX, Elon Musk's company. I mean, hold on a second. Here's Elon Musk coming out as apparently a challenge to the Kurzweils and the Zuckerbergs and saying, hey, this AI stuff connecting to AI could be the end of humanity. And then he does two things. One, he buys a company called Neuralink, which is about connecting the human brain to AI. And then he's got this company, SpaceX, which is constantly putting rockets up to put satellites into orbit that are beaming back Wi-Fi all over the planet, so no one can escape it, escape this cloud. You might remember, I think it was 2016, there was a SpaceX rocket at Cape Canaveral that exploded. Well, that exploding rocket was about to take a Facebook social media platform satellite into orbit to bathe sub-Saharan Africa in Wi-Fi. And in the new book, I've quoted people in the financial arena who have done assessments on this whole Wi-Fi satellite situation. And they're pointing out, because they don't know the real reason for it, but there is no financial sense in putting up satellites at vast cost to provide Wi-Fi for parts of the world where people don't basically have computers yet or smartphones yet. Because what's the point? There's no financial gain from it because it's not going to produce anything financial from people who don't have any money. But that's not the point. The point is not financial. The point is creating this global cloud of Wi-Fi where no one can escape it. That's why it's on trains, it's on buses. That's why it's in the streets being beamed. That's why it's everywhere. That's why we're having smart meters beaming Wi-Fi fields into your home. And of course, all these different sources of Wi-Fi are electromagnetic fields operating in frequencies like microwave frequencies that are lethal cumulatively to the human form, which is also on one level an electromagnetic field. And if you introduce very distorted, destructive electromagnetic phenomena and you put it in an arena where humans are, that's going to massively distort the human electromagnetic field, which is going to play through as what we call human disease, disharmony, illness. This is how it works. But you see, when you then, if we come back, because in the end everything connects to everything else, if we come back to this program that we started out talking about, where you come out of the womb and you go through a perceptual download all your life, this perceptual download does not include connecting these dots so you see the picture that I'm talking about. It's a download of information designed to stop you connecting dots. And that's what's happening. And that's why schools are a waste of time. They're programming operations. That's why the media is a programming operation, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, God knows they're just absolutely scrambling to try to reinforce the veil with whatever they've got, because, as we know when they know what's coming down the pike, so to speak, and I don't see anything stopping that. So just to finish off with this, what do you say about how do we fight back, if you will? How do we, resist this, overcome this?
I think resisting is the wrong thing to do, really, because if you break down the whole way reality works, on one level, it's an electromagnetic field or fields interacting. And if you resist you create an electrical circuit with that which you're resisting. This is why, you see these protests where people are hurling abuse at the police, and the police are often being violent back or whatever and resisting. You've got 2 points of resistance. You've got an electrical circuit, which is basically empowering both in what I would say was the wrong way. I think that we cease to cooperate. That is not resisting. That is ceasing to cooperate, because we don't need to resist something, for instance, when there's 7.5 billion in the target population and a relative handful in knowledge of what they're doing who are behind the manipulation. We just have to stop cooperating with it. But this is where divide and rule comes in, because you get the target population to go to war with itself down these fault lines of divide and rule, and then they give a free ride to the few that are controlling the whole thing, because they're too busy fighting each other. See what divide and rule is all about. That's why there's so much of it. That's why the divide and rule is on sex, the divide and rule is on culture, on race, on all of it, religion, all systematic. So, I mean, you can look for a solution, or you can remove the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem is that humanity, the vastness of humanity is unconscious. Unconscious in the sense of being unconscious of its true self. So if the problem is that humanity is unconscious, the removing the problem is to become conscious. If the problem is that the target population is being constantly divided and ruled, then removing the problem is putting down the fault lines of division and realize that we're all different points of attention in the same consciousness, and all these labels are just illusions that are there to divide us. If we let them divide us, they can be there to have a different experience if we want. They can be a good thing. They can be a different experience, lovely. Or, and that's what we allow, is they can become the fault lines that divide us and therefore rule us. And we can accept what the official narrative says and believe it's true. And that's a perception, but it's the perception that got us into this mess. So removing the cause of the problem is to question everything. RT, the Russian channel, has this motto: question more. No, don't question more. Question everything. And if it stands up, it stands up. But if it doesn't, well, you now know you're being told a lie in whatever area we're talking about. Then there's the realization and the re-self identity, where we stop thinking in terms of little me and I can't. Because if you self-identify with the labels of phantom self, then all you'll see is limitation. All you'll see is fear. All you'll see is consequences. But if you see yourself in terms of I am infinite awareness having that experience, then the experience loses its power over you, because it's just an experience. It's not who you are. And whatever experience you're having, there'll be another one along in a minute. So don't get too caught up in the one you're having. And the other thing is, of course, is how we respond to something dictates what the next stage is. If I respond to someone and smack them in the mouth, then I'm dictating what the next stage is. Either I'm going to get arrested, or the guy's going to get up and smack me in the mouth. If I act peacefully, I have dictated what the next stage is, which is very different to what would otherwise happen. So we need surely to look at our not just at what is happening, but our response to what is happening, which says everything about us. And instead of reacting in a way that suits the system, which is divide and rule and more conflict and more abuse and more emotional reaction, look at it in a way that infinite awareness would look at it. Look, it's just an experience. And in the way that things work, how you respond to that experience is going to dictate where that experience is going to take you, or whether it's going to continue or whether it's not. So take control of your life by realizing that your perception, which means your actions eventually, dictating your next experience. So if you want a nice experience, then don't act in a disruptive way, or your next experience won't be nice. We are in control by our reaction to events, which then dictate what the next events are and how they turn out. We've been persuaded that we don't have that power, and that's why most people don't use it and get caught in the perceptions of the system, which becomes the experience dictated by the system through those downloaded perceptions.
Yes, certainly. And, coming from your true identity as opposed to your manipulated and programmed personality or false persona shaped by this world is certainly critical to that, and disidentifying with your so-called outer reality. Very true. Now, before we talk a bit about your latest book, before we come to a close, I just want to ask if we can quickly just get into, can you talk about Morgellons and apparently it's an AI supposedly patented by Monsanto, which is said to be a cross between a human embryo and a spider, apparently. Okay, and people say it comes from both chemtrails and vaccines. And is this another form of AI takeover of humanity? And if so, what can be done to prevent this from taking over our bodies?
Well, I mean, that's a long story, but in short, yes, I think all of the above is true. I've looked at this in detail in the new book, and I've talked to a lot of people with Morgellons. First of all, it started to appear when chemtrails started to appear, and people began to notice them. And what is happening is that people are finding basically forms of technology and human-made substances, and substances that are certainly not made in the public arena by humans, in their bodies, and they can pull them out like strands of tubes and hollow tubes and what have you. They can pull them out of the body, but they go on replicating. And when you look at, as I have in the book, the descriptions of the world that's coming from people like Ray Kurzweil, then he's basically describing that. He's talking about intelligent AI in the form of intelligent technology of the kind we're talking about. And there's even a name for it now. They call it smart dust, because, of course, everything today is smart, because everything smart connects to everything else called smart. That's what it is. It's the creation of a smart grid with all these different expressions of it communicating with each other to create this grid. And smart dust is also what is called nanotechnology. It's so small the human eye can't even begin to see it. And this is clearly what, when you look at the evidence, is what is coming out down in chemtrails. And it's affecting not only the human body, it's affecting the environment. Now, I'm going to give you a quote here from Ray Kurzweil, who said, "Nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent creatures." What he's saying is that what they're going to do is infuse AI technology into the entirety of the environment. Well, how the hell are you going to do that except by dropping it from the sky? And that's what is the chemtrails are not only about that, but they're absolutely a fundamental part of what chemtrails are about, among many other things. And I have heard it said, I'm not saying it's true, I've heard it said that what we call Morgellons sufferers are people whose bodies are rejecting it. And as the body rejects it, they're having physical symptoms, and the stuff is coming out because the human immune system is trying to eject it. And so, people have these great sores on the skin and everything. whereas others, it is suggested, are assimilating it. Because you see, the end game is not only to connect the human mind to AI, but to create a completely different human being, to create a synthetic human being. This is why now they are talking publicly about the development of a synthetic genome. And I would say this is so important. Whatever you see in the public arena in terms of technological development is light years behind what's happening in the shadows. Because this is another important point. You know, these people are not sitting around a table, tapping their fingers, waiting for some geek in a garage in California to develop the next stage of technological development necessary for their plan of human control through AI. This technology has been there for a long time because it's being handed over from non-human sources. And the technological transfer, which is taking place to a large extent in these deep underground military bases around America and other parts of the world, from non-human to human sources, is being played out into the public arena in a specific sequence. This is why it's now moving so quickly. It's moving so fast in terms of the AI takeover through the technological developments, because they're not developments. They've been known about for a long time. It's just being played out into the public arena. And what they do is they create cover stories, like, again, some geek in a garage created it by accident or whatever. No. Of course, those things happen. But in general, it's coming out of projects that ultimately link to a non-human force, but projects that are run by DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, which works with organizations like the National Security Agency and the CIA to run Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is not the origin of all this. It's a means through which it comes into public use and into public society. It's coming out through DARPA. Why would DARPA, which develops things like death rays and ways of creating genetic destruction of specific particular races, which it has done, why would it have any interest in seed funding and developing the technology that is now these office assistants like Echo and Alexa and Siri? Why would it want to do that? Because it would like to let people have some, technological assistant in their homes. Oh, how nice. Those DARPA people are so lovely. No, because it's part of the bigger picture. That's why DARPA's behind it. It was why the CIA seed-funded Google before it became Google. Facebook is not run by Zuckerberg. I mean, crikey. He's a little boy in short trousers. He's just the front man. So what we're looking at, therefore, is the unfolding of this technology in a specific sequence, because they're not waiting for it to be developed. It's already developed, and this is why I say it's moving so fast. And the idea is to create a synthetic human. Now, here's the point: this synthetic human is not planned to be male or female, and it's not planned to have the ability to procreate. What we're looking at now is exactly, basically, what Aldous Huxley described in Brave New World, published in 1932. The world state hatcheries, where humans are created in specific genetic types, technologically, through synthetic means. And this is the real reason for the explosion in transgender everywhere. they're pushing that. Well, they're not pushing it. It's freaking exploding everywhere. Why? Because, again, who is the biggest target of it? Children and the young. Because they are fusing their perception of gender. First of all, you break up the perception of male and female, and you start to fuse the genders and have multiple genders between the two, which is why you get this long list of letters these days, getting longer. But what you're doing, totalitarian tiptoe, perceptual manipulation, is you're moving perception to the point where there is no gender. And we're hearing these phrases now. Oh, there's no gender. Don't identify with a gender. Well, being done to prepare people for when they are adults to accept this no gender human. And that's what it's all a mind game. And it's unfolding in front of our eyes.
Yep, exactly. And remember, folks, your true identity, who you really are, not this false incarnational personality, can easily overcome this, easily clear this, easily handle this. There's absolutely no reason for fear when again, you know and live and breathe who you really are with your true identity and connect with that and return back to that, and all of this, no matter how scary it may appear, it's nothing to who you really are, to your true identity. And that's where it's all at. And that's kind of like, I suppose, the note that I want to finish off with. And what's your version of that, I suppose, David?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, I think it was Gandhi who said, was the effect of you cannot hurt me unless you have my permission. And you cannot take control of my perception unless you have my permission, and I'll let you do it. And once we get our perceptions back and we get our true self-identity back, then the whole edifice will fall, because it's totally dependent on us not getting it back. That's why they work so hard to keep us in ignorance of the true self and in ignorance of world events and their real context and why they're really happening.
Yeah, that's when people can finally realize, I can actually choose to withdraw my consent and agreement just by saying it in front of the mirror. When I think about these, and that connection starts to build, reform with the true identity, beginning with simple things like pivotal things like that. And so, David, any last words? It could be about your book. It could be whatever it is that you feel people really need to walk away with from this show.
The thing about the book is that, I've been on this road now for nearly 30 years, and the new book, Everything You Need to Know but Have Never Been Told, is the work of 30 years, and there's a vast amount of new information in it, and it provides the detail that shows that this is not a myth. It's not, being pulled out of the ether. There is the evidence to back it all up. And there's a hell of a lot more than massively more subjects than we've been able to cover here, of course. It's available via davidicke.com, and you'll get it very quickly, because it will be posted inside America if for America and Canadian people. It won't be coming from Britain, so you won't have that postage to pay. It will be an American dispatch. And the other thing is that I've been on this world tour for the last 18 months called the Worldwide Wake Up Tour. And the last of them, it was all day, 10 hours, over 10 hours of information and about the best part of 2,000 illustrations. It was recorded. The last one I did, and it'll probably be the last all-day one I'll do, certainly for a long time, just before Christmas, and that's now available through davidicke.com. the whole 10 hours, 42 minutes, I think it runs. And then I'm on a tour all year and into next of evening events of 4 hours, starting in Britain in the spring, and then I'm going around Europe, and then I'm coming to America, including Phoenix, which will be in December, and Chicago will be around the same time, and I think Minneapolis is another one, and there'll probably be more. Yeah, it's something that I feel driven to do. You know, I get up in the morning and my focus is on this, and I go to bed and my focus is on this, because we have a window here to let people know what they're not being told, while there is still the opportunity to stop the outcome that this crazy group actually want to bring about, and that will only be done with information. So I do it all the time, 24/7, every waking minute anyway, and so we're pushing on and pushing on and pushing on through the next year and the year after that.
Yeah. So davidicke.com, ladies and gentlemen, go to his website, subscribe to it. He releases great articles every so often, and check out his new book. Check out that 10-hour lecture recording. And, every time you go to a place and speak to a huge audience, and as far as I know, you're the only speaker in the, let's just call it the awake and aware world, that's able to fill up whole basketball-sized stadiums. You're the only one that's able to do that, and you do it constantly. And every time you transmit this information, you raise people's you raise people's frequency. You raise frequency, period, which is critical in this whole grand scheme of things. And we can't thank you enough.
That's the thing, very quickly, about these events. When you've got an audience that has an open mind, and you're dealing with this information, it creates a collective energetic field that impacts upon the collective field. And when you do them around the world, that is compounded and increased. These events are very much about energy and frequency and all that side of it, as well as just voice to ear information.
Yeah, that's why your true identity continuously gives you all the energy, excitement, and love that you need to keep on pushing your physical 3D self forward and doing all this traveling and living in hotel rooms all the time and so on and so forth. The jet lag, the time zone differences, and we can go on. And, and there you go, folks, a living, walking example of, well, we heard the old saying, the truth shall set you free. I would say your true identity will set you free and give you all the energy you need.
Absolutely right.
Aligning what you do each day with that, and it doesn't matter where you're starting from. You can start today, and that's what I want you to walk away with. And David, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, been a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful chat, and let's stay in touch. And thanks again. And that was the great interview with David Icke, folks. Obviously, critical information, the kind of thing that you'll want to hear twice. You'll want to download this episode and listen again on the go while you're driving, traveling on the train or whatever. And it looks like we're going to go over time with the news portion of Ground Crew Command Radio, because we've got 20 minutes left, and we've got some critical information that needs to get out,
really critical information that needs to get out. So I'm going to get to that right now. But if you lose the connection, if you're listening to this live and you lose the connection, just wait about 20 minutes and download the recording of this. Okay. And you'll get the rest of the news portion, because there's some really important updates here that needs to get out. And so let me get right to it now. Quick updates. First of all, with our two primary and current planetary liberation operations, at least our public ones. The 144,000 activation campaign, that's the actual online outreach campaign on Facebook, okay, which does cost money, because Facebook and YouTube doesn't work for free. That's only just started a few days ago, and we're doing things like testing the ad, setting up autoresponder emails and so forth, and there's a lot of work involved in that, and the response a little low at the moment, but that's just an issue of changing the image, changing the headline and so forth. So that's a work in progress. Again, if you want to support this, then we strongly encourage people to provide support by supporting yourself, by investing in the 4-phase exponential healing and clearing system. Proceeds from that go straight to the online outreach campaign. So it's all good, early days yet, but we are getting there. So we can grow faster. Invest in the 4 phases for yourself, and so that we can grow faster to that critical mass amount of 144,000 meditators. Now, the Global Ley Lines Take On Chamber project, putting those 9 Take On Chambers at those crucial nexus points on Gaia's grids to pierce the veil, not just bring in much more light into Gaia's grids to win the grid war. We're still a bit short for the first one. So again, if you want to support that effort, spread the link to this radio show, or go ahead and be an investor. Become an investor, you get a healthy 37% return year on year. We've all broken down the math, and yeah, that's the situation with that. So just go to, you can send an email at support at Return to Your Truth to offer to purchase a share. You can purchase half a share for as little as $500. Either that, or forward this link to anyone that would be interested in investing in something that's really a good, viable business model as well. We got to pierce that veil, ladies and gentlemen, and of course to support the growth and the speed of growth of the 144,000, so that we get to 144,000 ASAP. Just go to returntoyourtruth.com/the THE. Check out the webinar, download the MP3, learn all about it, and invest in these 4 healing and clearing sessions. The testimonials about them have been amazing, and I'm really not kidding. You'll see the testimonials on either side of that page, and read up about it. It's arguably, based on the testimonials, arguably one of the most powerful and effective healing, clearing, and activation methods available online at the moment. So that's returntoyourtruth.com/THE, to invest in yourself, your own healing and clearing to get what you want in life and call the shots, and also invest in the growth of the 144,000. So that's just the updates with that situation. It is holy work. It's sacred work that does involve, that does have this 3D matrix component to it. Okay, a lot of organising and effort involved in both those two projects that needless to say, are all about, ultimately, liberating all of us. So, it looks like I'm going to get into the full analysis of Cobra's update on the Mjolnir situation in the overtime section, so it'll be in the recording. So, with the 12 minutes that we have left for the live feed, let's get into the news section of, again, through exposure, you can shine the transmutational light of your consciousness on this stuff. So we've had all the fiascos about the US government shutdown on the 31st, and then they shifted it to February the 8th. Okay. You know, and apparently, at least from one source, it's a white hat move to arrest the fake corporate government, okay, to shut it down. Because apparently they can only arrest them while they're out of session or something, and to reinstall the republic, the constitutional republic. And are we, the 144,000, that's getting there? Like I said, we're not quite there, but the 144,000 standing army of light, the deciding factor of which way this goes, you know, given what you and I are going to be up to on the 31st of January, that mass meditation on the super blue moon, lunar eclipse, which is another pivotal moment. Okay, now the 3D actions of the white hats can't stand alone is the first thing to understand here. Okay, it's not enough on its own. We need to raise the frequency of the planet to match that same higher frequency of such an event taking place, meaning the reinstallation of the US constitutional republic. Okay, and in case you're not a US citizen, you got to understand, once the US is liberated, the rest of the planet follows. Just as a critical side note there. So yes, we are the deciding factor. And rest assured, our galactic brethren will be busting their chops to make sure certain things are met and completed on their end with regards to the non-physical planes to help make sure this happens. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They need our help as well. So there's a lot of people or beings above ground and below ground depending on us to do our part and throw all our energetic weight behind their efforts, both the white hats on the surface and our galactic families and the underground groups, of course. So some of you may be thinking, you know, well, if it doesn't happen, maybe it wasn't for our highest good for it to happen just yet. Okay, that only applies if things aren't ready enough. You know, classic example of the Chimera threatening to detonate the plasma toplet bombs if the white hats shut down the fake corporate government. But remember what I said many episodes ago. The Chimera are mainly worried about saving their own backsides at this point and may save the plasma toplet bombs to just protect themselves only. Either way, it's up to us to drastically increase the speed of plasma toplet bombs removal through the 144,000 mass meditations. Okay, even if it's only 10,000 of us by next Wednesday, the 31st. Okay, can that be achieved this super blue moon meditation? Well, why don't we make that happen? Okay, because when you project your consciousness onto the non-physical planes from the physical during a mass meditation, darkness goes through a profound panic thanks to massive losses it sustains during our mass meditations. And this super blue moon meditation, you know, we're just going to, you know, hey, jack it right up and set that unshakable intent to remove all remaining plasma toplet bombs to make all this happen. And this is the special
thing about the 144,000. We'll be doing an extra 30 minutes after the standard 15-minute meditation under my direction to focus exclusively on removing all remaining plasma topple bombs. And I'll show you how to do it, so don't worry. And in one regard, it doesn't matter whether we succeed or not, because all our galactic off-world groups and families will be overjoyed and massively inspired by our actions. Don't discount that. This is a huge, big deal to them. Okay. So watch out for my email. That'll have the exact time for your time zone and so forth for the 144,000 Global Mass Meditation next Wednesday. Okay. Now, the Zimbabwe dollar, you know, they're trying to, with the new high frequencies, you know, that we're going to make sure about, with the Earth Alliance that's planning to install the Zimbabwe dollar as the new African currency in a move to liberate the long, impoverished, suffering African continent from Rothschild Vatican P2 tyranny. You know, can that happen realistically? Again, that heavily relies on us because the cabal see what the white hats are trying to do. Okay, they then plan and try to carry out their counter moves to stop positive developments like this. But if they lose their control over the energies through the 144,000 mass meditations being more powerful and numerous than their black magic crap, we open up the timeline where that kind of thing can happen. It really is all there for the taking. You know, event or no event. And we can, again, you know, be instrumental in giving Africans, sub-Saharan Africans, a decent crack at, you know, revitalizing their currencies. And that'll help them. That'll be under Earth Alliance control ultimately and help them lift out of poverty so that they don't have to wait for the mass arrest in the event. Again, we play a big role. All right, moving on. Despite White Hat Dragon Society concerns that the world situation is still far too volatile for a global currency reset, a financial reset, and the massive, you know, US government debt, here at 144,000 headquarters of Ground Crew Command Radio, we're also reminding the rest of the world that the reinstallment of the constitutional republic means that there is no debt for the United States, the constitutional United States of America, only for the cabal's corporate United States of America. You know, so the Chinese and Japanese, they can go chase their money with the cabal all they want. Like Drake said a long time ago, this time they get to buy lunch. Again, making that clear to the world and making things go our way is also our responsibility as the 144K standing army of light. By taking control of the energies through our mass meditations and therefore overriding whatever the cabal, you know, tries to invoke with their black magic rituals, we drastically accelerate the timeline possibility of shutting down the fake corporate government, regardless of whether it happens on the 31st or the 8th of February or not. So moving on. Pentagon sources say secret space program may have been used to down nuclear missiles aimed at Hawaii and Japan and stop the cabal from leaving Earth. White hats have hit their cabal stronghold of Reno, Nevada, the last major unregulated offshore banking center on Earth, where the Rothschild family have been gathering with constant small earthquakes, maybe from underground explosions, as far as that's concerned. And they've been hitting its underground base tied to anti-gravity disk technology and Nazi activity in Antarctica. And all this has precipitated a meeting request from a senior CIA official said to be related to Admiral Byrd of the famous Antarctica White Hat attack on Nazi presence there in 1947 to discuss White Hat plans with the White Dragon Society planetary liberation plans right on the super blue moon eclipse. Now, how can the 144,000 make sure this critical meeting is a success, for all of us, right, to get the best possible outcome from that meeting, right when we're meditating? So, needless to say, this is another physical event that needs our energetic support, okay? And that'll shift it to a much more higher likelihood or timeline outcome on that, with regards to the outcome of that meeting, where this particular faction of the CIA, which obviously appears positive, and the White Dragon Society can really lock arms together and walk in the same direction, and for the meeting to go really well, harmoniously, everyone understand each other, they're on the same page, they agree on the same things, they agree on full disclosure, come up with excellent strategies to shut down and remove the cabal, at least from the US. How well all of that goes, again, really heavily relies on who's in charge of the energies. And that's where you and I step in.